And welcome, students, as we jump into our next topic, and that of keeping safe in the digital world. We're going to kick it off with malware. Malware everywhere. So, the dangers of the online world. Let's just kind of talk about that here. There are many types of malicious software, exploits, network attacks, and much more that can pose a danger to your computer and your data. We've seen this a little bit. We talked about that with regards to privacy and ad blocking and stuff like that. Now, some of these dangers that are out there come from things known as software bugs. Well, a bug is not a actual critter so much as it is a software error or flaw that causes the software to behave in unexpected or unusual ways. A lot of times these manifest as, like, for example, exploits that people can take advantage of in order to, like, for example, to capture personal data. On the other side, we have malicious software, or as it's more commonly referred to as malware. This is used to interrupt computer operations, gather sensitive information, or gain private computer access. Now, malware has many varying forms. There's a ton of them out there. In fact, you could have said a couple years ago, they have viruses, worms, etc. But now there's so many different types because they have different roles of what they do. Now, some of these different types of malware are used by legitimate companies in certain circumstances. For example, like adware is just advertising, right? And a lot of times these do things just like gather analytical data on their users. But for the most part, most malware is not considered good. In fact, all malware is not considered good because it's malicious. Even though, yes, it might just be doing data collection, the reason why it's considered malicious is because it impacts the end user. So let's talk about the first type of malware, which is that of viruses. This is probably one of the more well-known pieces of malware. A virus is simply just a piece of malware that attaches itself to another file or program. Viruses are usually attached to the executable file of the program. So that way when you run the program, the virus is activated. And it can also spread relatively uncontrollably, damaging a system's core functionality and deleting or corrupting files. Viruses spread when that executable is run. Then it's allowed to infect other computers because, with things being on the network, it's easy to spread from point A to point B. Now, there are numerous ways in which a virus can spread, such as email and text message attachments, scam links, or even shady downloads. So, when you get that spam message, don't click that link. Next one up is worms. Now, very much like a virus, a worm can also infect computers across networks. However, there is a difference between the two of them in that a worm can travel without any human action. Like a virus, it depends on a person to click it in order to activate it. A worm doesn't need that. It's self-sustaining. It kind of feeds itself. It can move from point A to point B without waiting for you to come and click it. Worms instead spread by exploiting security holes in software. So remember how we talked about software bugs on the first slide? Worms take advantage of those software bugs through exploits and stuff like that to find a security hole that they can navigate from point A to point B. Now, once your machine is infected by a worm, the worm can do anything from corrupting files, stealing sensitive information, installing a backdoor, which is commonly referred to as Trojans, which will give cyber criminals access then to your computer, or they can also modify system settings. The next type of malware to discuss is that of rootkits. Now, a rootkit is a type of software that allows control over a computer system without the computer system user knowing. So you could have a rootkit on your computer and not even know it. Now, yes, there's a lot of different types of malware that are like this, but the reason why a rootkit is so dangerous is because it's nestled so deep down into your system that you can't just like run an antivirus program and find it. These are designed to be difficult to detect. All right, it's by design, it's intended to evade any software intended to find it. This thing will nest itself way down into your system registry. Now, because of the undetectable nature of rootkits, the software can execute files, change system configurations, access log files, and monitor activity to spy on the user because they get so deep within your system. And as I kind of already mentioned, there's not really an easy way to detect your rootkits. Usually, if you want to get rid of them, what you end up having to do is wipe your computer. Like you have to restart it back to ground zero because the rootkit is so nestled into the computer. All right, next up is the keylogger. A keylogger or keystroke logging is a hardware device or software program that records real-time activity of a computer using including keystrokes. When we start talking about this in the context of malware, we're of course obviously talking about the software application. Now, the software is often used to steal passwords or credit card information. The malware is also difficult to detect by installing itself in hidden directories or disguising or hiding the application from the operating system. So this is another one, kind of like your rootkit, that can be difficult to detect. Next thing is browser hijacking. And since we just recently discussed broken browsers, this is a very real thing that can apply to that as well. This is a type of malware which exists to modify internet browser settings without the user's knowledge or consent. Hey, this sounds like something we did talk about. Most often, this involves changing the homepage and the default search engine settings. However, these types of things can also inject advertisements, automatically redirecting users to potentially malicious destinations when they visit certain sites, and it may also have keyloggers, so it might do things like capture username and password. Now, the most common form of infection comes in the form of toolbars that are bundled with free software or extensions for your browser. So again, this goes back to that broken browser lesson. If you start seeing something that you don't recognize, go check out that extension tab, see if there's something in there that needs to be removed. Next up is rogue security software. This is a type of malware that is a counterfeit software program that appears to be genuine security software, but actually instead generates erroneous or misleading alerts to scare you to partake in fraudulent transactions. So it would be something that's, you download the software, like your computer is infected with like 300 viruses, scan now to remove them. Even though your computer doesn't have 300 viruses. Because the goal of the software is to trick you into thinking that your computer is infected and then cons you into actually installing or purchasing fake security software. Sometimes they'll even install additional malicious software on top of it. So you run it and now all of a sudden instead of having 300 fake warnings, you now actually have legitimate warnings on the PC. Next up is spyware. Spyware is another form of malware that functions much like its namesake. It secretly monitors your activities on the computer. Spyware's goal is to steal confidential information such as usernames and passwords for things such as banking sites, email accounts, social networking sites, and even online games. It has a cousin called adware, which is advertising supported software, or adware for short, and it manifests in the form usually of unwanted ads such as pop-up windows or on a toolbar. Now, some adware is more malicious than others. And that more malicious type tends to collect your personal information, track websites you visit, or even record your keystrokes. The not so malicious types like, hey, here's an ad. All right, but this is the kind of stuff where, again, ad blockers can come in real handy. Now, adware is usually spread from free software or can come from security holes in your browser or operating system. So again, you're noticing a pattern here with software bugs leading to potential problems. All right, and then we have Trojans. Trojans are malware that appears to be legitimate, but in reality does something malicious, often granting remote secret access to a user's system. Now, the real danger of Trojans is their ability to enable other forms of security risk, such as creating backdoors into the computer, using the computer as a slave in a DDoS attack, and installing a keylogger. Now, any file infected by a Trojan should be deleted rather than quarantined. All right, and this is the key here because with a virus, for example, remember the virus attaches itself to the program. So when it's attached to it, it's actually not part of the program. So that's why you can quarantine it and remove it. Whereas the Trojan is actually infected the file itself. So the only way you can get rid of the Trojan is to delete it. Now, obviously, we've thrown a lot of different types of malware at you. So we want to obviously not just tell you, hey, here's some malware, but how can I prevent those types of malware from getting to me? Because it's kind of a scary world out here with all these different things that could happen to me or my computer. Well, the first step is kind of an obvious one, and that's to keep your operating system up to date. Remember how we talked about, security patches and, software bugs and stuff like that? Well, your operating system, whether it's Windows, Mac, whatever, is software. It's a type of software, and therefore it's going to have its own set of bugs. So the best way to help prevent those things from happening is to allow your software to update. So when it's, you have that update that comes down and says, please update my computer. You might, say, well, I can't update it right now because I'm in the middle of something that's great. You can pause it but you shouldn't postpone it indefinitely, because the longer you postpone it, the more likely you are leaving yourself vulnerable to some kind of exploit. You also want to install and keep your anti-malware program up to date. There are so many different types of free anti-malware programs out there, and let's say you're running Windows. If you're running Windows, you don't even have to necessarily download anything. There is on Windows 10, and up you have something called Windows Defender Security Suite. So if I start typing Windows Defender on here, you'll see Windows Defender settings. Those applications right there are part of the Windows Defender Security Center. That right there is a built-in anti-malware program in your operating system. So if you're Windows, you have a caked-in anti-malware program. You can use that if you don't want to have to go out and download another software and deal with that. So you have options. You also want to update any software or firmware on your computer. Reason why I say software and firmware is because, let's say, for example, you have a driver for, let's say, a mouse. You have a specialized gaming mouse. Well, that gaming mouse, in order to run, has firmware that it needs to work. Well, sometimes those firmwares are also, guess what, software. And so they can have software bugs, so you have to update those. Software of any kind, whether it's a video game or it's even something like Microsoft Office, they're also going to have security problems that are going to need to be patched. So you want to keep those up to date, because the last thing you want it to be done is find out that, hey, I didn't update this and now they've been leeching off my information for the past 6 months. That's not a good thing. Another strategy you can do is use a firewall. Remember how we talked about worms like to traverse your network and spread from place to place? A firewall is a good way to help close those off. Now, the simplest thing to do is just to make sure that your firewall is turned on your computer. So if I come here, start typing firewall, I can right here check firewall status, and right now you can see this computer, for example, has my settings shut off. But of course, I'm running this off of a system administration thing, so there's other things I have going on. But generally speaking, when you come in here, you should turn these on. All right, so see how it says user recommended settings? You can click that button right there, and it will turn on your firewall. That will give you a first level protection. You can also get third-party firewall software if you want to give yourself even more protection. And of course, you only want to download software and files from trustworthy sources. If you're not sure where the software is coming from, you may want to reconsider why you're getting it. Sometimes it's like, hey, look, I can get such and such software for free. Yeah, it might be free, but it might also be loaded with malware. So choose carefully when you go out there and try to get something. That's why a lot of times if you get it from the source directly, you know that if it's from the source or if it's from an authorized, let's say, reseller, you know that you don't have to worry about it being loaded with a bunch of malware, for example. All right, and that's going to wrap up this lesson for today, folks. Hopefully they gave you some good information on malware, and I will see you next time.